Okay, good. Yeah, because I'll probably mostly stay over here, but.
Tell me where you're gonna stand.
Oh, shoot. Hang on, that's my wife.
Stand where you're gonna stand primarily.
Mostly right here.
You didn't even get the booster shirt?
I need a step stool. Hang on, I need to call my wife
I
back.
got a couple at the bar. You're gonna be putting. Oh, you're gonna be putting stuff up there as well.
That's not good.
That's not supposed to happen.
Good. Y'all are in here to the side, right? Yeah.
But we actually.
It's good to see this happening.
Well, we just gotta, I think, Jason, I think, since you do want to run for mayor, we gotta talk to the mayor. To get people to vote for you. No, it's because you want to gain the people that are also not.
I tell you, you gotta prove to people that you can sit down in a room with them, and you're not gonna tear their heads off, but you can like work with them. That's what people need to know. That's what they're afraid. With anybody. No, dude, I think you're great. I think with your kids and stuff like that, you'd have no problem. It's just the way people, and I'm not saying you have to change, but you just have to assure them they have to. I love the way you go about it.
Okay, I'll call, we can talk later. We'll talk later. Okay.
I got quite a few facial.
All right, let me see if I can figure out how I'm gonna set this thing up here.
Matter of fact, there's one of Harry Scruggs that went
Will this balance? Hey, that'll work.
We're gonna get a list of voters, we're gonna get a list of registered voters in Aransas Pass.
There we go. Look at that.
Down to who can vote and who votes frequently, and then the idea is to go out and touch as much of their flesh as we can and come back. And you guys are like, I mean, we did it in Aransas County. And you guys are, supposedly smarter than us. Down here in Aransas Pass.
Can you get that last part? Are you ready to roll or anything? I know before you start.
They will take you out of like in that RP with a fork.
As I come back here.
With a fork.
Anybody else coming, Jason? Are you waiting on anybody else? No.
I think we're good.
All right.
It's gonna be over 2 hours?
Yeah, all right. So, hey, thanks for those of you that are here. I'm cjgrisham, I'm the president of Multicarry, Texas, and hopefully one of these days I'll be a full-fledged attorney, so just waiting on getting sworn in and everything. But I've passed the bar exam, I've passed law school, I just haven't kissed the ass of the ring yet, and so therefore I get to kind of fight that stuff. But one of the things that I have tried to do, and I give this presentation mostly to groups that are marginalized by the system, and it's not necessarily who you think. Obviously, marginalized communities are poor communities, minority communities, but also marginalized communities like bikers, like those that go to car shows, that have the souped up cars, anything that law enforcement doesn't like. If they don't like you and they're constantly harassing you because of your involvement, that's who I tailor these types of presentations to, because it's important that everybody know their rights when they're approached by law enforcement. This is not a bash the cops' presentation, although I probably will at some point, because I've had my interactions with law enforcement on several occasions, and I've seen firsthand that it doesn't matter if you're following the law or not. If a cop wants to abuse your rights or abuse your person, he's gonna do it, or she's gonna do it. I used to just be the guy who would just do whatever I was told, and that didn't stop me from getting arrested the first time. So, what's that?
Cut that? Just cut for a second.
Oh, hang on, my phone's right there. Oh, there it goes. Oh, it stayed.
Oh, that thought.
My phone stayed. That's pretty good. That's a good spot.
Oh, that thought.
All right.
Okay, go ahead.
So, ignore where it says attorney. I'm no longer an attorney. My license expired. Okay, I just haven't changed this. My temporary license expired. All right. So this is not my most recent arrest. It was my most recent arrest until my most recent arrest. This was in Almost Park, and in 2013 I became a gun rights activist, not because I wanted to, but because I was out hiking with my son, out in the country, helping him earn a merit badge, and a police officer showed up and tried to disarm me. I wasn't about to be disarmed. I was carrying a rifle, literally out in the country, out in the middle of nowhere, perfectly legal. But, you know, it was a hard-headed cop coming up against a hard-headed former first sergeant, and that's how Open Carry Texas was born, out of that incident. This was in Almost Park, where this police chief here on the left had a history of abusing people who were openly carrying, even if it was just an openly carried pistol. Even though it's legal to open carry a pistol in a holster, and it's legal to open carry rifles, his officers would roll up on, Jack here was holding a sign, had a pistol in a holster, and was put on his face at gunpoint for no other reason than he was lawfully carrying a holstered pistol. So I got involved, and I said, okay, well, generally when I get Open Carry Texas involved, I first want to make sure that what I'm being told it wasn't created by the activists that are talking to me, because, you know, it's very easy to get yourself involved in a way that you know law enforcement's going to get involved. So I wanted to make sure that the story was what the story was, which was we weren't doing anything wrong. We were just standing there. And the police came and pointed guns at us. You know, they weren't antagonizing them or anything. Sure enough, a buddy of mine and I go out there, and my buddy's got his 22 rifle with him. I've got my handgun, just like this exact same handgun, exact same holster. And they're trying to tell me to leave because they're dealing with my friend. I'm like, what crime are we committed? First, they at gunpoint tried to order us on the ground. I ended up being tased. This is right before I got tased, or right as I was getting tased, and ended up cracking my head open on the concrete. Had a concussion and MTBI that I still deal with migraines and things like that. We are suing them. This officer right here, I don't know if you can see it. You can't really see it in this picture, but these people are so untrained. This guy has his sling in the trigger rifle, and his rifle is not on safe. So that's how well trained this department is, and the fact that they don't like. But anyway, I'm just not afraid to stand up for what's right. And so here's kind of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to focus mainly on the First, Second, and Fourth Amendments. I know everyone cares about the Third Amendment. Y'all know what that is? Yeah, that's where they can't quarter troops in your homes. But no, I'm going to focus mainly on the First, Second, and Fourth, because these are the ones that most people have violated when law enforcement comes up. And these are the ones that are most at stake. Even during a lawful encounter, these are the rights that are most at stake. And then I want to talk about failure to ID, and then give some general advice, not legal advice, not allowed to give legal advice, just some general advice on how to handle yourself. So I come from the Army. I'm a retired Army First Sergeant. I was in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was in Iraq in 2003 for the main assault into Iraq with 3rd Infantry Division and 3-7 Cav. And then I was in Kandahar, which is the home of the Taliban, when I was in Afghanistan in 2011. That next picture is my first arrest picture. That's my booking photo. I tried to make it as sexy as I could, and it failed. And this was
I was
this,
outside waiting for you to get out of jail that day.
this is from a GQ actually did a cover story on Open Carry Texas because we had created a national movement. And I just love that picture that he did outside my farm up there in Temple, and so I use that as a profile picture a lot. And then where I went to law school, the Appalachian School of Law. When I went to law school, I knew I had to leave Texas because as an activist, I wanted to focus on being the best attorney I could. I didn't want to get distracted by the legislature, didn't want to get distracted by people having issues and things. So I went to this beautiful town of Grundy, Virginia, up in the Appalachian Mountains, of about, I think it's a population of 1,300, something like that. Awesome place, awesome people, small private school. And then, this is a quote: when they took the Fourth Amendment, I was silent because I don't deal drugs. When they took the Sixth Amendment, I kept quiet because I know I'm innocent. When they took the Second Amendment, I said nothing because I don't own a gun. Now they've come for the First Amendment, and I can't say anything at all. This is kind of where we're headed.
Agreed.
And if we don't fight for all of them, we're going to lose all of them. A right that's you don't fight for is a right that you're going to lose. So the First Amendment, what a lot of people don't realize, covers several different areas. There are several different rights contained in the First Amendment. We all know about religion, that you have the right to whatever religious belief you want. And I know it might come as a shock or disdain to others, but yes, Muslims have the right to be Muslims here. Jews have a right to be Jews here. Christians have a right to be Christians. Agnostics have a right to be agnostics. You have the right to worship your God, your gods, your trees, your government, whatever you want, whatever your God is. I know there are a lot of people who their religion is the government. They have a right to worship that, but they don't have the right to force that on anybody else. And then speech is a big one. And there's all kinds of speech. Today, when I went to the city council meeting, I had a rubber gun in my holster instead of my normal pistol I have on now. And of course, they stopped me and tried to say that there's no guns in there. I took it out as a rubber gun. I was waiting because I have had instances where I would do that, and the city council would be like, well, you can't have that in here either. I'm like, well, this is symbolic speech. This is my protesting your rules. It's not a gun, so it doesn't fall under your 30-6, 30-7 signs. And it's not a weapon, so you can't claim that it's a weapon that you're trying. It does nothing to hurt anyone except your feelings. And symbolic speech is protected. And for a long time, that's what we did with Open Carry Texas when we carried our rifles everywhere. You might remember back in 2013 to 2015, people carrying rifles all over the place. We were carrying them into Target and Starbucks and making national news everywhere, and people didn't understand what we were trying to do. We were trying to make a point that this rifle I can carry anywhere in the state of Texas, but if you can see my handgun, I'm a criminal. That makes no sense whatsoever. That's how we got open carry passed. And so that rifle, not only was I exercising my Second Amendment rights by carrying the rifle, I was exercising my First Amendment rights to symbolically protest the fact that I can carry this, but I can't carry this, and you can see it. I can't tuck in my shirt. I can't take off my jacket, things like that. Then you've got freedom of the press, which a lot of people don't realize this. If you don't watch First Amendment videos, audit videos, and things like that on YouTube, the press doesn't mean CNN, ABC, CBS, Fox News. That's not the press. The press is the press, anybody. Anybody can be a journalist. It doesn't require, there's no requirement in the Constitution that you have quote-unquote credentials to be media. The media is the media, and government is not allowed to discriminate against the freedom of the press. And so we've got people like Jack is here today. He's a First Amendment activist and a citizen journalist. Everybody can be a citizen journalist. If you look at what happened with not George Floyd, was it George Floyd? Who was it that had the one that was choked out? I think it was George Floyd. Okay, yeah, it was George Floyd. It was a citizen journalist that took that video. It wasn't CNN or MSNBC or anything like that. It was an individual with a camera. And we have just as much of a right to film as they do. And then you've got assembly, like right here. The government can't keep us from assembling. And this is what I use a lot with the motorcycle groups, right? Because there's a problem in the state of Texas specifically, and I'm going to restrict, if I talk things about the law, I'm talking about Texas unless I say otherwise. I'm talking about Texas law and Texas law only. If it's federal law, I'll tell you it's federal law. But in Texas, we have a problem with the so-called criminal street gangs law. And what law enforcement love to do is if you're wearing what's called a cut, you know, if you're a member of a biker group and you've got that vest on that says, you know, Sons of Anarchy or whatever on the back of it. I know that's a fake thing, but I don't want to call out any groups. But, you know, then they will stop you for the sole purpose of searching you because they think that just because you're wearing that and someone in government without due process has said, if you're a member of Sons of Anarchy, you are a criminal street gang, and it's illegal to be in a criminal street gang, and therefore we have a right to search you. When I get to the Fourth Amendment, I'll explain how that is not the case. You have a right to associate even with felons. You're allowed to be friends with rapists. You're allowed to be friends with terrorists. Okay, you're allowed to do that. What you're not allowed to do, of course, is engage in criminal activity as a part of a street gang. You're not allowed to support in any way, like if you give money to those organizations that are committing criminal acts. You can't do that because that's supporting a terrorist group or a criminal street gang. But if you're involved in that activity.
But isn't giving police money to the police guild and all that, and that's supporting criminal activity?
If you are donating directly to the police department, yes, you're supporting gang activity. But paying your taxes, no, you're not. And then, of course, seeking redress, and that's the big one. Where you see seeking redress mostly getting violated is, for example, when you go to a city council meeting and you start saying kind of like what Jason was saying today, where you call out each individual member. There are some, especially the big cities, if you go in there and you start calling out individual city council members or county commissioners, excuse me, sir, you need to address the council, not any individual member. Under the First Amendment, I can criticize anybody I want in government. That is my right to seek redress. And if the problem is with an individual legislator or an individual city councilman or woman or an individual commissioner or a judge, you have a right to address that person. They can't shut you up.
Amen.
They can't do that. So that's everything that's covered in the First Amendment. And the most times that you see the seek redress problem is when you're trying to file a complaint and they won't accept your complaint. That's a violation of seeking redress. If that complaint, even if that complaint is not forwarded to anybody and they don't give you a resolution of that. Now, they don't have to say that we found him guilty or not guilty, which I disagree with, but they have to say that we resolved the issue and we have dealt with, if there were any potential issues, they've been dealt with administratively, or this person's been fired or whatever. But they have to deal with your complaint, and you are entitled to updates on that criminal complaint. Or not criminal complaint, but just that complaint, regardless of what it is.
What if they don't do that?
Can I ask you a question before you go?
Yes.
What about petition? Is that a form of redress, and are we entitled to information on that? Or can they just ignore it?
When you say petition,
Like a legal petition verified by the city council. That's a good example.
if there is a process for like signing petitions to have like legislation or
Ordinance.
ordinances or anything, if there's a process for that and it's in public, because you know, like in Texas, we don't have a recall procedure except in certain circumstances. Whereas in, was it Oregon or California, you can recall just about anybody, you know, if you get so many signatures.
Any Democratic state.
Yeah, so, but if the city council has an ordinance that describes a process for doing that kind of thing, they are required to follow that process. They're not required to have that process, but they are required to have a process for accepting complaints and dealing with complaints, regardless of what that is. If they don't, the problem with this whole idea is that if the government doesn't do what it's supposed to do, they think they can just tell you no, and guess what you've got to do? You've got to go find an attorney. And guess what that means? It's going to cost you money. And you're probably not going to get anything out of it because generally when it involves a redress issue, unless there are actual damages, even though a damage to liberty is a damage, the economic benefit isn't there. So really only the richest people in this country are able to seek redress, especially against governments that don't do what they're supposed to do. That's where I came in, because I went to law school. I didn't have a single dollar in debt. Now, I took out a loan my last semester to help cover some extra expenses, but I have no law school debt. I did that on purpose. My goal as a retired first sergeant, as well as somebody who, because of my combat disabilities, I've got disability, I can afford to take cases that no one else will take because there's no money in it. Unfortunately, there aren't many people like me. There aren't very many at all, really. There are a few out there because lawyers are required in Texas to do pro bono cases. But what's defined as pro bono is so generic, and generally, it's gotta be some big issue, like where they help out a nonprofit somewhere, and, it's just a feel-good thing.
Money being one.
Right, so that's the problem with the system, is that in order for a regular person like you and me to force the government to obey our First Amendment right to seek redress because they're not doing their job in allowing us to file these complaints, or they're not following up these complaints, it costs money, because you gotta hire an attorney, unless you search. And I will say this, and I don't know many attorneys will tell you this, anybody here can be an attorney. Law school is nothing but me teaching myself and then my professor quizzing me on what I taught myself. So it's just me paying someone else for me to learn what I could have learned by myself, so that I can go and get this little piece of paper that says, now I can represent other people. But anybody that wants to can become your own attorney, your own pro se attorney, and learn process, and learn how the system works, and learn how to apply the law, and how to pull out the law, and things like that. And if you just can't afford it, there is a way to do it. It's just resource intensive. It just means you got to do a lot of study and stuff, unfortunately.
If somebody wrote up the petitions and the things, the briefs, not the briefs, but actually the if you're gonna file something, wrote up a template, and they can say, here's the template, add your stuff in here, here's the template.
Yeah.
For our citizens pro se, the problem is, we don't have any real templates to go from. It's like, we don't have that basic thing. And I believe most lawyers are just copy and pasting the template they have themselves.
And that's where, and here's the other secret about the legal field. Hardly any attorney writes his own stuff. Whenever I want to file let's say, like for example, when I wanted to do a motion to restore property down in Harris County, I went into a system that I pay for, LexisNexis, for lawyers, and I type in what I'm looking for, and I pull up a template, and all I do is just change a few things. Almost every lawyer does that. They took their template from some other template and just updated it. And that person took their template from probably another attorney and just updated it. And like I said, anybody can be an attorney. Anybody can. At least your own attorney. And it just takes doing that.
There's how you make some money.
Yeah.
Learn how to put those templates out for the public and sell them.
Right, and LegalZoom is a good resource as well. I mean, you gotta pay a little bit, but it's not a whole lot of money that you're gonna pay. But I would just recommend people, if you're gonna do that, you can Google almost anything. And you can find a template or you can even go into and get yourself a Pacer account at the federal level. And if you've got a Pacer account up to, I think it's either $30 or $40 a quarter, you can pull down documents and of actual cases and see every single thing that's been filed, and you can just use that as a template, and it's pretty much free. The Second Amendment, my favorite, of course, is talking about rifles and pistols. So in Texas, rifles are pretty much unregulated, almost completely. There are very few places you can't take a rifle. There are probably a lot of places you shouldn't, but I don't believe in that whole just because you can doesn't mean you should. Hey, by all means, do it. Just do it the right way and try not to scare the hell out of people. At open meetings, now, the city councils and county commissioners, and we're working to fix that this session. If there's an open meeting, they can ban guns inside that open meeting, only in the room where the open meeting is taking place. So, for example, if you go to the city hall, they have their signs on the doors that are just as you come inside the city hall. But then there's that long hallway before you get to the city council room. That long hallway, you can have a gun in, all the way up to that door to the meeting, legally. Those signs don't mean anything until you get to that door into the open. And then guess what? It only applies once they gavel the meeting in being open. So even if I go in there, the meeting's at 5:30, I go in there at 5 o'clock, it's not an open meeting yet. I can carry my gun in there until 5:29, Or if the mayor gavels it into session, that's when the only time they're allowed to ban guns. They cannot ban them in the entire building. They can only ban them in the room where the meeting is. And then as soon as they say this meeting is adjourned, you're allowed to carry your gun again. Period. Doesn't matter what that sign says, because if they leave the sign up, it's an illegal sign.
They have to have the signs on every entrance point though.
They have to have the signs on everywhere that a public entrance point, yes. And also, those signs apply to everybody except law enforcement or military if they're on active duty and their duties require them to carry a gun into a city council meeting. Maybe it's like San Antonio where they have bases and sometimes there are issues that, maybe the garrison commander needs to go to the city council and address. So if for some reason he had to carry a gun, he'd be able to do that.
So if you wanted to take out the council, that would be the time to do it.
That's the thing.
Wait, before I go, Blanchard, I don't mean that really, I'm just asking. I don't
Well,
mean-
and I've given these speeches all across the state, where examples of city councils that had no guns policies and people bust in and start shooting
Yeah,
people
what are they gonna do?
and there's nobody there to do anything. And there are also videos and stories of people busting into city councils where people are allowed to be armed and the guy's taken out pretty quickly, either by a council member or someone in the audience.
I did a YouTube search because we were protesting our taxes. And we had 5 police officers in our little city council because they wanted to, make sure that we behaved. But our PD chief said, he goes, the reason we're having these because there are all of these city council meeting shootings. So I went to Google it on YouTube and I found 2 of them. One of them, the guy started spray painting the wall before he shot. So I'm like, there you go, like you saw half of it, somebody goes to spray paint a wall, take them out.
Yeah.
But it didn't really seem like there was this rash of shooting to justify the sort of their attitude
That's an intimidation
about it.
factor.
It was intimidation.
Yeah,
But
and I'll
it just
tell you-
doesn't happen.
The 30-6 and 7 signs at city council meetings has nothing to do with public safety and everything to do with politics. It just has to do with, I don't like guns and I'm gonna do everything I can to undermine the rights of people. And I know here Chief Blanchard said, I support the Second Amendment, but, sorry, once you said but, that means you don't support the Second Amendment. Because if you support the Second Amendment, and he told this to my face, I said, if you told the city council to take down those signs, they would take down those signs. You said, yeah, that's true. I said, then you don't support the Second Amendment.
They
So,
also didn't take them down.
yeah, exactly. The Motorist Protection Act doesn't really apply anymore, ever since we got constitutional carry passed, but what I wanted to put up there is you can have a gun in your car without a license. Now you can have it open or concealed. Just know that if you're carrying a firearm openly on or about the person, and the legal definition of about the person is essentially within arm's reach without materially changing the position of your body. So if you can reach it, without having to go, and reach around in the back seat or something like that, if it's open, that's on or about the body, and it's just got to be in a holster, if you can see it at all. And last session, we got rid of the words belt or shoulder, because when we first got open carry in 2015, against our wishes, they added the words belt or shoulder holster, but they didn't define what makes a belt holster. I literally used to put on these ankle holsters, and I would tie a string from my holster up to my belt. It's like, see, look, it's a belt holster. And there's no definition for what a belt holster is, but now I've got a connection to my belt. Obviously, my ankle holster is now a belt holster. But we finally got rid of that, now it's just holster. So now the question is, well, what is a holster? So, a holster is whatever a holster is. And there's no definition for that. So look at what the manufacturer calls it, because I've got an AR pistol, and there's this thing called the Stratus Systems Support Holster. They call it a holster themselves. All it is a little device that you put next to your buttstock on the pistol, and it hooks this thing that can hook onto your body armor. It hooks into straps, and then you can just click it into that. Well, what I do is I just click that thing onto my AR pistol, and now it's holstered. And I can carry it on a sling because it's still in a holster. That's what the company calls it. It's a holster. Is it really a holster? Yes, it is for the purposes of people watching this video. Licensing is not required. There are several benefits to doing that in Texas. For one, you've got reciprocity if you leave the state. Most states that allow licensed carry recognize the Texas license.
What was that word?
Which one?
The rest, what?
Reciprocity.
Reciprocity.
So that means they recognize our license or we recognize their license. So, you don't need a license in Texas to carry openly or concealed as long as you're 21 years, actually, I take that back, as long as you're 18 years of age. The law says 21, but y'all may have heard a judge recently, last month I believe it was, ruled that it was unconstitutional for 18 to 20-year-olds to be excluded from being able to carry a handgun. And the judge threw out that portion, but he gave the state 30 days to appeal. The state did appeal within that 30 days, but then they withdrew the appeal and the statute it expired. So technically now, if you're 18 years or age or older and you're not a prohibited person, in other words, you're not chemically dependent, you're not a prohibited person because you're a child molester or a spouse abuser or you have a felony or anything like that, you can carry a handgun openly or concealed. So 18 and up. And that's kind of what constitutional carry is. Now the difference between open and concealed carry, what is the difference? If you can see any part of the gun itself, it's considered open, even if it's just a little bit of the buttstock. Now if you can see my holster, that's not open carry because you can't see the gun. So I mean, until I get to about right about there, that's, now you can see the gun, and that's considered open carry. Now, if it's inadvertent, reaching up onto something to grab something off the top shelf, and for me that's like the third shelf. Then it inadvertently shows that's not you have to intentionally do it. So inadvertent is not a problem. Also, printing does not mean it's open carry. If you're wearing a tight shirt and you can easily see the outline of the gun, that still doesn't mean it's open carry. It's still concealed. And you can carry loaded or unloaded, doesn't matter. You can have one in the chamber. I've got one in the chamber. I've got my hammer cocked. All I've got to do if I need to put my gun into service is take it off safe and fire. There are some places like in Utah where it's got to be 3 actions away from firing if you're going to open carry it. And 1 action is taking it out of the holster, 1 action is removing the safety, and 1 action is pulling the trigger. So as long as you're 3 actions away. Really quick, 30.5, 6, and 7 signs, and then 4603. Be familiar with 4603. That's where you cannot carry guns. You probably know where those are. Those are in school buildings or on the school grounds where a school activity is taking place. That is in post offices. That is in a bar or any facility that receives 51% or more of its income from off-premises alcohol sales. So that does not include liquor stores that sell alcohol. That's all they sell because it's for off-premises consumption, not on-premises consumption. So really that's just your bars, and those bars have to have 51% signs up there. You can always check, a good example of this is my movie theater in Temple put up a 51% sign when they started selling alcohol. They don't get 51% of their sales from beers here and there. So I looked up you can go on to the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission website and you can type in an entity and find out if that place is a 51% or if it's just what they call a blue sign where they sell alcohol. Also, by the way, with constitutional carry, it used to be that you could not carry, if you were unlicensed, you could not carry a gun into a place that sells alcohol at all. Gas stations, liquor stores, Walmart, HEB, if you did not have a license, technically it was a felony. That's no longer the case. They still have the signs up there that say the unlicensed possession of a firearm in this facility is a felony. That I tell everybody that I go to, I try to tell them, hey, you can take those signs down. They don't mean anything anymore because that's been taken away. Question?
Can I just make a point? This is like know your rights,
Yeah.
and why it's important for you to know your rights in case you don't already know, because these old signs are still up.
Yeah.
Really nobody's fault, but don't expect a police officer to show up and know that that's an old sign. Expect a police officer to make a mistake and say, see the sign, you're going to jail, and it would be cool of you to say, well, I know my rights, and
Yeah.
you know your rights on that, and then you don't go to jail maybe.
I mean, if you can remember it, HB 1927 is what got rid of that signage. So that no longer exists anymore. And we've been trying to get TABC out of the gun business for years. And we finally succeeded in doing that for the most part. And also, so 30.5, if you see a 30.5 sign, All that means, that's the section of the penal code, penal code section 30.05. If you do not have a license to carry and you see that sign up in English and Spanish, you can't carry into that facility with a handgun, okay? If you don't have a license. If you have a license, you can carry past the 30.5 sign, no problem. If you see a 30.6 sign, 30.06, that refers to penal code section 30.06. It means you can't, if you're a license holder, you cannot conceal carry into that facility. Now, if you don't have a license, you can conceal carry into that facility, because 30.6 only applies to license holders. 30.7 is the exact same. It only applies to license holders, and it only applies to open carry. So if you see a 30.07 sign which says the licensed possession of openly carried firearm in these premises is prohibited, whatever the specific language is, then you can't open carry. For them to ban guns completely, they have to post a 30.5, 30.6, and 30.7 sign in both English and Spanish in 1-inch block letters in contrasting colors. So if you see a little piece of paper where they've got that doesn't count. Now they can also just come up to you and orally tell you, we don't allow open carry in here, or we don't allow concealed carry in here. And once someone gives you that oral notice, that counts as well. You have to leave, okay? If you don't leave, then it's trespassing.
Is that only if they're the manager?
It's anybody that's in control of that property.
Yeah.
It could be an employee. Now, if it's just a regular employee and you think that the employee is just asserting his or her own beliefs onto you, still leave, but call the store and speak to a manager and ask them what their policy is and let them know what happened to you. Because I have personally had it happen where an employee who just didn't like guns say, we don't allow guns in here. And then I call and I talk to the manager and they're like, yeah, we'll talk to that employee, next time, here, have a burger on us or whatever. Yeah, that's not our policy. Any questions about 2A in Texas? I know there's a whole lot that goes on, but really right now, just know where the prohibited places are. So you can't go into a courtroom, can't go into a bar, can't go into a school building. Now, if you don't have a license, if you do not have a license to carry in the state of Texas, so like I've got licenses from other states as well, but if you don't have a Texas license, then there's a 1,000-foot safety zone around a school, unless you're just driving through it, okay? And so an exception if you're dropping off or picking up kids under Texas law, that you can drop off and pick up kids as long as you don't step out of your car having a gun in the car. If you don't have a license, that 1,000-foot federal law applies. Okay, the Texas law is 300 feet, but federal law applies at 1,000 feet, and you can be charged for either. If you have a license, you can literally walk right up to the front door of a school and not be breaking the law. But once you go across that threshold, you're a criminal, okay, because you can't take it into the building. There is a bill by Senator Hall that we are fighting for this year. I can't remember the bill number yet, but we're trying to get rid of that to where if you've got a license, there's no gun-free zones. Because I think we've seen gun-free zones don't work. And the most law-abiding segment of society are those of us with licenses because we have to go through background checks, we're fingerprinted, we go through a lot of crap, we're trained, all that. All right, Fourth Amendment. All right, the first thing, the right of the persons to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. No warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. You can, a police officer can violate your Fourth Amendment rights. Is that mine? Oh, good, thank you. A police officer can violate your Fourth Amendment rights with your consent. So, anytime you hear, do you mind if I search your insert, whatever that is, your car, your bag, the answer is always, yes, I do mind, no, you may not. Okay, because at that point they need a warrant or some kind of probable cause to believe that you've got illegal materials there. So, my recommendation, my advice is never, ever, under any circumstances, ever, I'm trying to think of any exceptions, no exceptions, ever give consent to a search. Ever, never give consent. Even if they have a right to search you because they think something's on you, make very clear that you do not consent to that search. Because later, if they find out that there was no evidence, that they had no probable cause to search you, he just said he did, well then anything that he does find that he didn't expect to find gets thrown out. Now, when is the only time you should give consent? Never, ever, never give consent to search, ever. If you look at case after case after case after case, and we looked at these in law school, almost all of the case law comes from someone who gave officers consent to search because they thought, he's not gonna find that. And he finds it. And even though he was looking for something completely different, if you give consent, it doesn't matter what he finds. And a lot of times, there might not be anything in there, but something gets put in there.
Yes, sir.
That's why you never give consent either, because you don't know who you're dealing with. They don't know who you are, you don't know who they are. And especially if it's a gang task force whose job is to get convictions and plant drugs, to find drugs, then I don't trust them either. But never, ever, ever give consent. Terry v. Ohio. We all hear that. I want to clear up what Terry v. Ohio really means, because police officers obviously have not read the case law, and they've obviously been misled, or they're just deliberately lying about what they think it means. Terry v. Ohio means that if there is reasonable suspicion that you have, are, or are about to commit a crime. So if you have committed, are committing, or about to commit a crime, if they have reasonable suspicion, here's what reasonable suspicion is. They get a call for a bank robbery. The suspect for the bank robbery is wearing a black shirt, blue jeans, and red shoes.
Not me, Blanchard.
And 2 blocks away from the bank, they see Jason here,
Not me.
who's wearing a black shirt, blue jeans, and red shoes. But he didn't rob the bank. But they have reasonable suspicion to believe, because he's in proximity to that bank, he meets the description. Oh, and it was a bald dude, but I couldn't remember if he had facial hair or not. Or he had a hat on. I don't know if he had hair or not. But they have reasonable suspicion to believe that he may be involved. That's the first step. The second step is they have to reasonably believe not only that he was involved, but that he is, quote, armed and dangerous. They can't just do a Terry search just because they stopped you. An officer can't walk up to you and say, we got a phone call that somebody was being loud here, and I'm going to check you for weapons. That's not how that works. They can't just walk up to you and do a search. They have to reasonably believe, one, that you've committed a crime, and two, that you are armed and dangerous. Being armed doesn't necessarily mean being dangerous. This is where your attitude comes in. If a police officer comes up to you and you're armed, and you show him through your actions or through your, whatever, hey, whatever you need me to do, I haven't done anything wrong, I'm not a threat to you. Now, he's probably still going to disarm you, and I will tell you that you're probably going to lose if you fight that, because if there's reasonable suspicion to believe that you're involved in a particular crime, then they're just going to say, well, I had reason to believe he was armed. I thought I saw a bulge under his shirt or whatever, okay? So they'll make something up. But if someone just comes up and wants to talk to you, and then there's like, hey, while we're talking, do you mind if I pat you down to see if you got any weapons? What's that called? What's he asking for? He's asking for consent, which means you give him none. No. Yes, I mind. No, you can't pat me down. Well, do you have any weapons? No, I don't answer any questions. Not yes, I do, or no, I don't.
That's molestation.
Yeah. And you don't answer, do you have weapons? You're not required to, in the state of Texas, inform a police officer that you have a weapon. Okay, you are not required to do that. No matter what they say, there is zero requirement. If you have a license, there is a rule in there that says, as a license holder, if you're legally required to identify yourself, you must also present your license to carry. Okay? But there's no penalty if you don't. It's not a crime not to give him your license to carry. But nowhere does it say you have to tell him that you're armed or not armed. And I will tell you, it is always a good idea not to tell him, because as soon as you tell a cop that you've got a gun, you are now Osama bin Laden's henchman. Okay? And you're a threat because these guys don't like seeing other people armed. Now, there are exceptions, of course, to everything I said. So that's kind of what Terry v. Ohio is. Incident to arrest, if they do, they can do a search of your vehicle. There's what's called the vehicle exception. If you're getting arrested, they are allowed to search. Let me start back. Let's say they stop you. By the way, they can pull you out of the car during a traffic stop. Okay, so don't believe the people that say you can't pull me out of the car. The Supreme Court's already decided this. Yes, they can pull you out of the car. And then what I recommend you do, especially if you've got one of those types of cars with the little code on the outside of the door, is as soon as you get out of the car, you lock it. Because they can't search it at that point. Also, if they put you in the back of their car and you have no access to your car, they can't search your car either. The only way that the vehicle exception applies is if they pull you out of the car and they're leaving you in close proximity to the car. In other words, you have fairly quick and easy access to your vehicle. They can do a wingspan search of your car. They can search anything that you could have reached from the driver's seat to make
Sitting in
sure.
the seat, correct?
What's that?
That is sitting in the seat?
That is sitting in the seat. It's called a wingspan search. But if they remove you, let's say they put you in cuffs and they put you behind a cop car, it's like 30 feet away, or they put you in the cop car, they have no right to search your vehicle because you have no access to it now. And if you're getting pulled over for speeding or a driver's license or anything like that, they're not going to find evidence of that crime in the car. Now, if they've pulled you over for DUI, that is probable cause to search for perhaps an open container or evidence that you were drinking in your vehicle. They can look for evidence of the crime they pulled you over for, but generally, unless it's a DUI or child trafficking or something like that, let's say they pull you over because they suspect you of trafficking illegal immigrants into the country, they can search your trunk and all that kind of stuff. But for most traffic citations or traffic pullovers, they can only search the wingspan if you have immediate access to that vehicle, okay? That's it. If they put you in the cop car in handcuffs, they have no right to search your vehicle. That is a violation. If they find anything in your vehicle while you're sitting in the cop car and you didn't give them consent, that can be tossed out, okay? Exigent circumstances, if exigent circumstances exist, for example, if you're fleeing and you run into your apartment, they don't need a warrant to come into your apartment after you. They can chase after you and go into your building. If there's a fire and they know that somebody's in the house, that's an exigent circumstance. They can break into your house and help rescue animals or people. Exigent circumstances means there's got to be something out of the ordinary. And then the exclusionary rule is kind of what I mentioned a little bit. Anything they find in violation of your Fourth Amendment rights cannot be used against you at trial. It's the fruit of the poisonous tree, we call it. Oh, detention versus arrest. Hang on, really quick. Let me go back to that. So detention versus arrest. When you are detained, to be detained, they have to have reasonable suspicion, remember that word I used about Terry v. Ohio, that you either have committed, are committing, or are about to commit a crime. That's what a detention is. They cannot detain you because they need to figure out what's going on. That's not a reason for a detainment. That's not a reason for an arrest. Well, am I being detained? That's the first question you always ask, because not only do you never consent to a search, but you should never consent to a conversation with a police officer, unless he's a friend of yours and you're doing it on friendly terms, not because you got pulled over or stopped outside. Anytime that a police officer in his official capacity stops you, and then, actually I'll get into this at the very end, but am I being detained? Am I free to go? Yes, you're being detained. What crime am I being detained for? There has to be a crime. If he says anything other than, I suspect you of X, Y, and Z, you're free to go. There is no detention. Now, I guarantee you what they're going to say is, well, you're detained anyway.
And then what do you say?
And then you say, for what crime? Am I being detained? Am I free to go?
And then what do you say?
Then you shut the fuck up. No. But you can do what I do, which I don't recommend for everybody because, bad things can happen. But if an officer doesn't, I have a video of me doing this actually. I got stopped riding my bike in Milam County. I had my AR-15 on my back, which I do all the time. I ride my bike with my AR-15 on my back. And he stopped me and he's like, hey, we got some calls. And I was like, oh, what, are people jealous? And he's like, oh, we just got some calls. And I was like, okay. And he's like, got any idea? I was like, well, am I committing a crime? And he says, no, I just, for my report. I'm like, well, okay, I prefer to just keep going out my ride. Well, hang on a second, let me call back. I'm like, no. Am I being detained? Well, you're not being, okay, I'll see you later. I literally just left. He also said, well, hold on, I need to call. I was like, well, you call whoever you got to call. I'm going to be riding my bike this way. If you think there's a crime I'm committing, you can stop me down the road. You can do that, but you better gosh darn know how to defend yourself if the cop is a dick. he has to have reasonable suspicion that you are committing a crime to detain you. He can't just detain you because, I got a call. Okay, I can call and say, hey, there's a guy with a purple shirt at Texas Strong Fitness. You know, the police officer shows up and he says, hey, we heard that somebody, you know, hey, you're detained. Well, what for? What crime? Well, I don't know yet, but we got a call that there was somebody here with a purple shirt. Well, that's not a crime. I'm being detained. Well, yet, for what crime? That is important because, and always film, that's going to come up later too. But that needs to be made clear because if you are arrested, if they try to find some reason to arrest you after the fact, when you could have been free to go, and they find something during that time that you have exerted your rights that I would prefer to leave, I do not consent to this encounter. And except when I'm doing my educational bike rides, you know, I generally will talk to cops because I want to educate them. I want them to understand what I'm doing and treat gun owners respectfully. So me personally, depending on my mood, I will usually talk to police officers, but I don't ever recommend anybody do it unless you kind of know, like, I ask more questions than I answer. I don't answer any question that has anything to do with anything other than what color is the sky. Well, I probably wouldn't even do that because if I change my answer later, that's reasonable suspicion that I'm hiding something. So just don't answer any questions. But anyway, an arrest is where they have probable cause that you did commit a crime. It's not just, we got a call that you match this description. Now we know that you left, you know, your business card on the counter when you got done robbing them, and I just ID'd you because even though you didn't have to ID, you ID'd anyway, and now I've connected you to the crime scene. That's probable cause. Now you're under arrest. That means you are being removed from the crime scene and taken to another place. Wherever that is. It can be jail, it can be an interrogation facility, it can be to a detox site, whatever it is. If you are removed from the area, that is an arrest. Okay? Being placed in handcuffs can be a detention or arrest. It's just they're investigating criminal activity, but there has to be criminal activity. If they can't articulate criminal activity, you need to get that on camera. Okay? All right,
I have
now.
a question.
Yes.
I know you said that you don't have to tell the police that you're armed, like in a traffic stop or something like that. But if they ask you, are you armed? Do you have to tell them that you're armed at that point?
If they ask you, you just say, I prefer not to answer that question. With all due respect, and try to be respectful. I mean, these guys are doing their jobs. I treat everyone with the same respect they give me. If they come at me all authoritarian-like, I let them know who the true Article 1, Section 2 authority is from, we the people. And I will treat that officer the exact same way he treats me. Obviously, the ruder you are, the worse your encounter is going to be because they have all this power and they think they can get away with it. But if you know your rights, and you know what they can and can't do, and you know what their left and right limits are, as we say in the military, and you can articulate that, then it's not going to be a problem. But you don't have to answer that question. What I would recommend you do is if a police officer says, are you armed? Just say, with all due respect, officer, I just don't prefer to discuss my day with you, and I don't answer questions. I just don't answer questions, okay? Well, you have to tell me if you're armed. Officer, I don't have to tell you if I'm armed. There's no law that says I have to tell you that I'm armed, and I'm not going to answer your question. Whether I am or not is none of your business. So, all right. Failure to identify is Penal Code 3802. They love this one. I would say probably 30% of police officers know what this means. The rest will say that if I asked you for your ID, you have to give it. Under Texas law, you are not required to identify except in one circumstance. One circumstance. You are under arrest. If you are being placed under arrest because you have committed or you are suspected of committing a crime, you must identify yourself. You have to give your name, address, and date of birth, or date of birth. If you are detained, you can't lie about who you are, but you're not required to tell them who you are. If he says you're being detained, I need to see some ID, you don't have to show ID. Failure to ID is only after you are under arrest. Now, why would you not just want to say, okay, officer, here you go. Guess what's going to happen? They're going to make a report. Your name's going to go in that report. And the more times your name goes into that report, every time a police officer pulls up your name, they're going to see all these contacts that you've had with law enforcement, and eventually you're going to start getting treated differently because you've had all these interactions with law enforcement. But if they don't have your name, they can't put your name into a report. And there's no reason for them to know your name. That is for you to tell other people. You know, try to go to a bar and walk up to some hot chick or hot dude and say, hey, what's your name? What's your phone number? You're not required to give that information. You can choose to give that information. It's the same way with police officers, and especially with police officers, or anyone in government, unless you're under arrest. If you're a witness to a crime, you're not required to identify. You just can't lie about who you are. If you are being trespassed from somewhere, that's not a crime. You know, if like you're given a trespass warning, well, I need your ID so I know who to give the warning to. No, you don't. It's not a crime. I'm not under arrest. I don't have to give you anything. You can take a picture of my face and stick it up on the wall. So that's what failure to ID is. So if you're detained, you can't give false or fictitious. If you're a witness, you can't give false or fictitious information. You can't lie about it, but you're not required to tell them who you are. If you're under arrest, you must give your name, residence, or date of birth. That word is a legal term, or. So sometimes I like to play little games. I'll say March 2nd, 1974, or whatever my birthday is. That's the birth of Texas is March 2nd is our birthday. So if I say March 2nd, 1974, I've met the requirements of failure to ID because I've given my name, residence, or date of birth. Now what they're probably going to say is, well, that really means if you fail to give us any of those, if you don't give us your name or your address or your date of birth, but legally words have significance and commas have significance.
Correct.
All right, here's some advice. If you're pulled over, this is what I recommend. One of the first things you're going to hear, depending on the officer, they've gotten a lot better about this, is, good afternoon, ma'am or sir, my name is Officer so-and-so. The reason I pulled you over is you were doing 55 and a 50, 55 and a 45, whatever. And they'll tell you right up front, okay? Don't answer anything. Keep your mouth shut. If they just come up to you and they say, license and registration, please. Officer, why'd you pull me over? Well, as soon as you give me your license and registration, I'll tell you why. No, that's not how this works, officer. Unless I'm under arrest, or unless you suspect me of committing a crime, I'm not required to identify myself to you. Well, you give me your ID and I'll tell you why I pulled you over. With all due respect, officer, why did you pull me over? Am I free to go? No, you're not free to go. Well, why not? Because I suspect you of speeding. Okay, now you hand over your license and registration because that's a crime. And when you're pulled over, you're arrested. Okay, when you are pulled over for probable cause, because he had a little radar detector and it was on your car and it showed that you were exceeding the posted speed limit. I'm not going to get into the tricky ways of getting around that. Okay, I'm just talking about there are ways to how speed limits work in Texas. Did you know that actually there's no such thing as a speed limit for a private driver in Texas? Go read chapter 545 of the Transportation Code. I'll just leave it at that.
Commercial.
Yeah, those signs out there that say 35, 55, 75 apply to commercial traffic. It's right there in the commercial code. But anyway, I digress. I don't want to get you guys in trouble. If he says you were speeding, hand over your license and registration. Don't say anything else. Do you know how fast you were going? Well, with all due respect, officer, I don't want to discuss my day with you. Why'd you pull me over? You don't know how fast you were going? I know how fast I was going, officer, but I'm not going to discuss that with you. Why did you pull me over? Never admit to anything. A lot of people think they're going to get a... Look, they're trying to raise money. Okay, they're revenue raisers. That's what they're trying to do. They don't get paid if they don't take your money from you. That's how they get their money. So always ask, why did you pull me over? Don't tell them why they pulled you over. Oh, I know, I wasn't paying attention to my speed. Just don't talk. Literally, just do not talk. Let them ask the questions. You don't answer any questions other than, here's my license registration. They love to ask me, is the license, or is this address on your license correct? Officer, everything you need to know is on my license. I don't even answer that question. What's your phone number? If it's not on my license, I don't have to give it to you, officer. What's your social security number, officer? If it's not on my license, everything you need to know is on my license. That's it, over and over and over again. Be repetitive. Everything you need to know is on my license. I don't answer questions. Okay? So, and if you do it respectfully, believe it or not, even if you do it respectfully, a lot of people are like, well, if I don't, that's just me being a prick. I'm going to get a ticket if I don't answer these questions. If the cop wants to give you a ticket, he's going to give you a ticket. if he's a cool guy and you're cool to him, you're just like, look, with all due respect, I don't mean to be this way, but I just don't answer questions. I hope you understand. I'm not going to implicate myself. Have your driver's license, insurance, registration handy. It's preferred, even though, a lot of us were allowed to show our insurance on our phones now. That is legal. You don't have to have a piece of paper. And the cop can't demand that you have a piece of paper. You can show it on your phone. I've had that problem happen before up in Williamsburg. No, Williamson County, thank you. I've had the problem where he's like, well, you gotta have a piece of paper. You need to read the law, sir. No, I just have to show you proof of insurance. And the law specifically says I can show it to you in digital form on my cell phone.
Doesn't dispatch tell them who's the car is registered to and who they have, if it has insurance?
They already know that stuff anyway, generally. Now, there are times where it won't show up for whatever reason. That either the insurance company hasn't properly admitted it or the system didn't accept it. I mean, there have been times where it hasn't been admitted.
Okay.
Oh. Did I say?
Nope.
Okay. Oh, I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, usually when a cop pulls you over, he already knows your insurance and that you're registered. I mean, you've got a sticker right there in your car. So he knows that your car is registered. And when he calls dispatch, they're going to say who you're insured through because they have to report that to the state anyway. Now, it also said the law requires you to display these things. You don't have to, and I don't recommend, although a lot of people are very uncomfortable with this, handing over your personal documents. Because it's so easy for them just to decide not to give it back to you for whatever reason. Now they've got your stuff. You are only required to display your license, registration, and insurance. I have these little clips on my windshield, up on the upper left part of my windshield, right above my steering wheel. If I get pulled over, I put my license up there, and I put my insurance up there. They can see my registration, they can scan my registration, I don't need to show that to them. And I leave it up there. If they want to look at it, they can write down what they need. You are not required to give them physically your personal effects. Remember when I talked about the Fourth Amendment? You have a right to be secure in your persons, papers, houses, and effects. Papers and effects. That includes anything you have on you as an effect. And your papers, of course, are your license and all that. You only have to display it. Once you've done that, that last part that I'm not going to say out loud because we have kids here. I was warned when I get to that point. Remember, I have kids here. Just be quiet. Just be quiet. Don't answer questions. There's a great video on YouTube they're called the Pot Brothers at Law. Look up Pot Brothers at Law, type in those 4 words down there and watch their videos. They're hilarious, they're great, but they are on point. The more you talk, the more you're talking yourself into something.
If you can't remember Pot Brothers at Law, just Google
Those 4 words.
STFU Fridays.
Yes.
Friday, STFU.
Those guys are awesome. Their videos are freaking amazing.
Great.
And they're lawyers in California, and they smoke pot while they're giving you advice. So,
Yeah.
what do you know? But I cannot express enough when I went through law school how many cases are because people just didn't shut their mouth. They talked themselves into something. It's very simple. This is how easy it can be. I remember one case, so they had interviewed this guy and he had talked about eating spaghetti on a Thursday or something. And then later they did a deposition and he said it was lasagna. Okay? Does it matter? No, but they just found out that he lied. He lied about either lasagna or the spaghetti or both. What else is he lying about? So the more you talk, even if it seems inconsequential to you, that's why they say when they read you your rights, and I'll get to that in a second as well, it can be used against you. Notice they never say it may be used to help you. Anything you say can be used to help you. No, it can be used against you. They don't care what you say it's going to help you. They want what's going to help them and what's going to hurt you. So just be quiet. Now, if there's a knock on your door, don't open the door, don't let him in. You're not required to. Just because there's a police officer out there knocking on your door does not mean that you're required to open your door. If you feel like you want to open your door, you can open it up a little bit, keep a chain on it or something, or have something to where it can't be kicked in. You know, if you've got something on the ground, like a wedge or something, that you can open it up just a little bit, I just recommend not open the door. We just want to talk to you. Well, we're talking. Let's talk. I can hear you. Let them talk through the door. Once you've opened that door, it's easier for them to get into your house. If they have to break down your door, they better have a good reason. And I guarantee you that there's going to be a higher standard of review for a cop that breaks your door down versus a cop that just walks into an open door. Okay, they're probably going to get away with walking into your house when they're not supposed to because your door was open, as opposed to them having to break your door down. So don't open your door. Ask for the identification of the officer, especially if it's not obviously identified. Who are you? What's your badge number? What department are you with? I'm so-and-so with this department. Okay, what do you want? Well, we got a call about something. I'm like, okay, I don't know what you're talking about. Next. I'm not going to answer any questions.
What if they threaten to kick in your door?
That's up to you. Do you want to, if you firmly believe that there's nothing, that's a risk that you've got to figure out for each individual person. Because if you still say no, which you have a right to do, even if they threaten to kick down your door, you better make sure that 100% they have no reason whatsoever to come up with to kick down your door. I would recommend for businesses that there are so many reasons they can invent. All they've got to do is find something, anything. And then once even if they didn't know that's why they knocked down your door at the beginning, if they find something, there's reason. Now you have to pay for the door, not them. So it's a risk. It's a risk. For private residences, it's a lot different because there are more rights in the home than there are in the business. So in your home, you have far more liberty, and they have to jump through far more hoops to be able to get you. Ask what they want. Ask if they have a warrant. If they have a warrant, ask them to slide it under the door. Now, I realize that a lot of people are like, they don't have that kind of patience. Look, if they've got a warrant, they're required to show it to you. You're right there at the door. You're not destroying evidence. Now, if you run away while you're talking to them, or, they're like, I got a warrant right here, and you say, well, shove it under the door, whatever, and then you run away from the door, you've probably given them probable cause to break down the door, because now we've got exigent circumstances, especially if they think they're there for drugs. They might think that you're going to flush stuff down the toilet. They might, if it's something that can be hidden or destroyed, and you run away from the door. So stay at the door, ask them for that warrant, have them slide it under the door, read the warrant. And it's important that you read the warrant because if they're looking for example, I hear you have a machine gun, a 50 caliber machine gun that's not registered. Well, that means they can't go looking in your knife drawer. They can't go looking in, smaller cabinets because you can't fit an M60 machine gun or a 50 caliber, I said, into a small drawer. They can only search places where you would be likely to have a 50 caliber machine gun. Now, if they're looking for drugs and the warrant says that they can look anywhere the drugs can be stashed, that's pretty much everywhere because it's small. But if they're looking for something big, like let's say a stolen stereo, they can only look in places where a stolen stereo is likely to be hidden. A closet, maybe under the sink, but definitely not in your spoon drawer, your knife drawer, things like that. So that's why it's important that you know what the warrant says so that you can keep them